We will call the meeting to order. The first item up is the adoption of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda with removing item 2B.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
So,
Why we're moving to B?
yeah, this is a proposal to purchase property.
Yes, staff wants us to pull it. They're not ready for us to take action on it.
So
Wait a minute.
all I want to make sure is that contract isn't, I hadn't seen it, but there's no contract, but there's an expectation that there's a time that starts today.
We had a contract ready to go, we received another proposal that wants consideration.
Thank you. I second that motion.
All right, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Oh, are we live?
Voting on that?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, all right. If you'll-
Yeah, let's do that. So wait a minute, something just came up on my screen.
Okay, yeah, it's on the board agenda.
Give us, Julie, we're sorry, we're not ready.
I could put yours in there.
No, we need to learn how to do our jobs.
And Mr. Hall.
Number should,
He's coming.
call into if
He's
she's gonna
coming
be able to
live
call.
right now.
Do you know? Or should I just have her call in?
That conference line call that I sent you the other day.
Yeah.
You want me to give it to you
Yes,
again?
please, if you don't mind.
So Todd, we just called the order and adopted the agenda?
Yep.
Okay.
Next item up is if there's a motion.
Make a motion to go into executive session to discuss the items on the agenda.
All in favor? Aye? All right.
You have stuff
All right, we will
in front of your-
reconvene open session. The first item up is public comments related to the agenda. First three people in line, if you will come up to speak, Mrs. Anna Bradley, then Elizabeth Hamilton, and Ashley Wright. First three. Please come on up.
I'm here to speak on the expansion of the Buist kindergarten class. And the fact that you're bringing this issue to a vote of the board shows that you respect the policies and procedures that govern this board. And because you have respect for those policies, I'd like to read an excerpt from your policies governing magnet schools. The superintendent may not use admission rules or procedures that have not been publicized at least 1 month prior to the application period, and may not apply any admission procedure or criteria retroactively. That's from your website. I want to also call your attention to the admission criteria circulated by CCSD in January for Buist. I won't waste your time with it because I know you've all read it, but we have the explanation circulated by this superintendent detailing the admission process for the kindergarten class, and the admission criteria that you circulated was disregarded. This represents a clear violation of the superintendent's authority and the board's policies. Again, from your policies and procedures, I want to read that to you. If there are more qualified applicants than positions available, then a random lottery must be used to select those students admitted. And looking at the superintendent's justification for the admissions debacle this year, that's not what happened. After using improper admissions criteria, which resulted in additional qualified applicants, no lottery was used. Another clear violation of the superintendent's authority and of the board's policies. I trust that you will follow the policies that you're bound by and not approve the proposed expansion, which violates your policy. If you don't, this policy gives everyone in the room a roadmap to challenge your decision, which will almost certainly follow. Further, I would ask that any board member who has any personal interest in the outcome of this matter recuse himself from the vote. Please join in the conversation that's already in progress regarding making real differences at Buist, like increasing diversity and then raising the bar at all schools across the district. These conversations begin with the administrators, the teachers, and the parents, not behind closed doors as they have been. Thank you for your time.
Just for the record, there's not that I know of any board member who has a personal interest in this. So go ahead. Next one up is Ms. Anna Bradley and Ms. Elizabeth Hamilton.
Your grandkid is.
Hi, I just wanted to speak briefly on the agenda for the MCAG group for District 20. I was, in full disclosure, a part of that group. We were given 5 questions to discuss and think of ideas of, as you know, to present to the district. And I feel that all of the time that we spent into with Mr. Goss and the rest of our group was really now kind of just lost, because all anyone is talking about is Buist and the expansion, and our ideas and our efforts were put into providing equality and rigor for the entire district, not just Buist. And we would like to see the district pour more resources into the schools instead of dismantling the top school. So now the message that we came up with, the other 4 questions that you all asked us to decide on, completely have gotten lost in the discussion because now all the attention is turned to Buist. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item up is I'm not sure who's already spoken.
Person.
Next person, excuse me, Miss Elizabeth Hamilton, and then following her will be Jackie Drescher and Mr. Bo Mueller, please.
My name is Elizabeth Hamilton. I do have children in attendance at Buist, both as a rising second grader and in the kindergarten cohort. I moved to James Island 4 years ago. When we moved, our realtor told us, unfortunately, in this county, you either are in a good school zone, or if you care and you're in a poor school zone, you send your kid to another school. And that's what we continue to see in Charleston County. I live in James Island Elementary School District, and I volunteered my time as a tutor for literacy there because they need my help. That is the key to success: community engagement and trust. There is a principal who is leading our community neighborhood school and doing great things. People take pride in James Island Elementary. That was not the case 4 years ago. James Island doesn't have the level of charter and magnet schools that some of the other zones do. So my urge to the board, build trust, build transparency, engage the community. We are cart in front of the horse right now. Decisions have been made without thinking about how they're going to impact the students, the teachers, the 4 walls that house schools, both Memminger and Buist. Those students, those parents are in the dark. We're acting out of fear, unknown, distrust. So please get your communities engaged, both for long-term success and with these short-term goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person up is Miss Jackie Drescher, then Bo Mueller, then Charles Cole.
I'm Jackie Drescher, and my sons are rising 6th and 1st graders at Buist, and I also work full-time as an attorney for 23 years. You are here 2 weeks before school starts to vote on whether to add 2 kindergarten classes after the children have been invited, and it's so late in the game. And you are now in a position where you may feel you're left with no option because someone decided it was easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. It seems like you're being asked to cast a vote in breach of your own policies out of necessity, like a rubber stamp. It's unfortunate the way this went down. You should not be in this position, and I don't envy it. The one thing that keeps nagging at me is this: if this were really the right thing to do, then why was it done in the manner it was done? And then the email that came out that was clearly working backwards. If this were truly about filling the remaining spots, additional applicants could have been tested, or you could have dropped it incrementally to 74 or 73% until the existing classes were filled. But adding 2 entire classes doesn't really make sense. What was the purpose? You should be able to base your decisions on studies and parent and teacher input before admissions letters went out, but that's not what happened. This decision does not just affect kids in 2 classes, it affects every student, parent, and teacher at Buist. The school was built and designed for a certain number of students just about 6 years ago. For example, we have a small dining room, so children eat lunch, the kindergartners eat about 10:45, so we can run 9 lunch shifts. You add more shifts, do you push back the 8th graders later, or make the kindergartners eat lunch at 10:30 or 10:15? That's not fair to the kids. My kindergartner loved playing with all of his little classmates last year on the playground, so now do they not get to know all their classmates? Or do we have 100 kids on the playground, which would clearly be a safety issue? Adding so many more kids affects the school for the next 9 years and creates 9 more years of we will figure it out. Every year as these additional classes advance through the grades, you have to find teachers willing to take a job that will not exist the next year. And the list of negative effects goes on. It's a domino effect and a recipe for failure and disaster. And it's in breach of your own policies. But my biggest concern is that this is just the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Bo Mueller, then Mr. Charles Cole, then Brooke Gebrocht.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk also about Buist. And my biggest thing, and you've heard this a couple of times from other people, is the need for honesty and transparency. We have not gotten that from the district. Far from it. In the case of the doubling of the kindergarten, when y'all lowered the standards to 75 to 65, why y'all didn't put a waiting list and the order of the lottery, and as had been done in years past, and that's what it should have been done. But this is clearly the start of an expansion attempt by you guys. No one ever talked to the parents or, any of the stakeholders of the school, and we've lost confidence in the district and for you guys' oversight. And I just really hope that y'all will bring back honesty and transparency, and it goes beyond just Buse. We now have Meminger that y'all are talking about merging, but really you're not going to be merging it because there's not enough room to double Buse and have enough students room over at Meminger. So you're really talking about closing Meminger now too. And look, I know this is tough. I know these are hard choices y'all have to make, but y'all have not done right by the current Buse students. Adding 2 classes, like has been said before, causes hardships. The classes can't be clustered together in the building with their grades anymore. And it's just hard. And I encourage you guys, please be honest. Let us know what y'all are talking about doing. Engage with us. We want the school district to be better as well. We're not just trying to protect Buse. And again, just honesty and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Charles Cole, then Mrs. Brooke Gebrocht, and then finally, Mr. Jeff Montgomery.
How y'all doing today? My name's Charles Cole, and I cannot imagine the difficult job that you guys have to do. It's very nice that you guys have volunteered and run to better our schools. But the vote today is, I guess, on the expansion of Buse kindergarten class for 2019. I am a father of a rising first grader. I have 2 other kids. And it's just reflective of what has unfolded in regards to this regrettable situation. First, let me say, all District 20 schools and Charleston County schools need to be given better resources. This is not about we just need to protect this one school. Meminger has been depleted of resources. Sanders Clyde was a terrible school when I was growing up. I've tutored there, tutored there, but I'm in favor of diversity, absolutely. But let's do things the right way and let's live up to the values that you're supposed to have. And if you want to look at the admissions criteria for Buse, which we've already done, so I'm going to skip over that, but Ms. Superintendent, your email that you sent to the Buse parents was unacceptable. I don't know who you were trying to send it to or what reading level you thought that they had, but if that is the basis for your acceptable reading level, then you need to reset your calibration. There was just a poorly written email with too many lapses in logical thought to get into. To me, it seems implausible that 52 kids out of 2,000 were able to achieve the passing grade. In 2000, the reference to that 2018 article from the Post-Inquiry about how many kids applied. Even if that were true, the stated rationale used to make their decision shows either a severe lack of critical thinking, a severe lack of planning and organization, or a serious case of being underhanded and not being straightforward with everyone. So please live up to your jobs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Brooke Gebrocht, and then also Mr. Jeff Montgomery after her.
Hi, I'm a District 20 parent with a rising 4th grader at Buse. I've spoken to our district rep, and I sent him an email this morning, and I just want to highlight a couple of those things. One of the issues, which Ms. Wright already highlighted, was the retroactive vote that's occurring today, apparently about adding the 2 kindergarten classes. Whatever is decided today, it seems unfair to the families that were added in those 2 additional classes, to Buse parents, and to the schools within the county as a whole. First, I want to talk about how it will affect our family. We're grateful to have our daughter in a small school with a wide range of ages where she has the ability to be mentored by the older students and to return the favor to the younger students as she moves up in grade level. Adding the 2 classes will have already guaranteed that the school will have to be divided between middle and elementary schools, therefore changing the nature of both the small school atmosphere and the mentoring program of the house system currently in place. Also, in regards to facilities, kindergarten classes must have direct access to outside, and kindergarten through 2nd grade classes must be located on the first floor level, and we are not sure how this facilities planning will be accommodated this year. Also, in considering the district as a whole, or as the county as a whole, it seems like putting all the emphasis on the abuse program that is already working neglects the schools that aren't working in all the districts. And I believe Abuse should remain a countywide magnet school to provide an exceptional public school curriculum to families in the entire county. I can't claim to know how to improve failing schools, and I admit that we were nervous to put our daughter into James Simmons, which is what we are districted for, as I'm sure that you are all nervous for your children, because no one wants to experiment with their child's future. But I know many families don't have a choice, but we just want to express that we know that changes need to be made, but we wish it was done in a public setting with more opportunities for questions and answers to take place, such as in town hall meetings, as was suggested before. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Jeff Montgomery. All right, hear none from Mr. Montgomery. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is the mission critical items updates. Typically, Ms. Jeffrey would lead this section. I will continue on in her absence. The first item up is the mission critical updates.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Every board member has a gray folder at your desk. And in that folder, as well as in the board docs, are the documents that I will be talking about today. Can you find them? First, well, just a recap. When we met on June 24th and heard the recommendations from the community committees, the district reviewed the board deliverables that you had given to us. You gave us 10 different deliverables, and I'll talk about those in just a little bit. But on June 24th, you voted on 4 of those deliverables, and those are the 4 that we want to report on today. The first one was to bring recommendations regarding all magnet and choice schools back to the board by October 2019. And I just wanted to let you know that Academic Magnet alumni will present some recommendations to the board as part of a special workshop on August 26th. They were unable to be here today, and a few of them could be here, but they wanted a larger number of Academic Magnet alumni who have some recommendations regarding Academic Magnet. They, I think, will form the basis of some of the other changes that can be made in all of the magnet schools. We've talked about partial magnets, whether or not to continue them, perhaps to continue them within a particular zone or constituent area, but not having them outside that particular zone or constituent area. So that process will start, the public discussion of that will start on August 26th. So we're thinking maybe an hour before your regular board meeting.
Is that on here? Are you on here yet?
No, ma'am. I'm just going through the 4 things you asked us to do, the actions that you took on June 24th. The second thing you asked on June 24th was to expand student access to mental health counselors or other social emotional supports for this coming year. So in your package is what Jeff Baroe calls a chiclet chart that looks like this. It has these various colors. Down the left-hand side, you'll see the list of all the schools. And on the left-hand half of the paper, you see the 2018-19 supports for social, emotional, and mental health. Starting with the SEL, the social emotional learning curriculum, the bullying prevention curriculum, the Department of Mental Health counselors, telemental health, climate coaches, social worker support on restorative practices. If you look to the right-hand side, That's what Jennifer Coker has summarized for us that will be in place for this coming year. So you can see how we're moving from a lot of those yellow and red boxes on the left to the green on the right. So we simply wanted to update you on the amount of progress we're making. And we know that we'll do a budget revision in September. You had set aside some funds to address mission critical action. So one of the items that Ms. Coker will be prepared to discuss at that time is what it would take if you want to convert any more of these boxes to green on the right-hand side, if you want to add any more supports for social and emotional health for the coming year. So that's the quick update on the second action that you took on June 24th. Do you have any questions about that before I move on?
I have one. For any reason why Daniel Jenkins didn't receive the bullying prevention?
I'm sure that Ms. Coker has an answer for that. Did you hear the question? When you look at the bullying prevention, there are a few schools that are in red. Daniel Jenkins is one of them. Could you speak to why all of the bullying prevention boxes at every school are not filled?
In particular, Daniel Jenkins, why wouldn't they get it?
So the bullying task force that worked all last year, we have not yet found a bullying prevention curriculum that's research-based for the high school level. So all of the reds you see are for high school for this coming year. All pre-K to 8th grade schools will have access to the curriculum that team identified, and that team is continuing to meet to try to identify a process for high school. There's not a great one out there that we have found that we think will work across the district quite yet, but we're continuing to search.
Why wouldn't the same one work for high school, that's for middle school?
Well, the curriculums are written based on the ability of the students, and as students get older, the curriculums change, and so the research in high school isn't as prevalent as in K to 8. So there's a few out there, and we are going through them right now that the team has identified, so we're hoping to have an answer for that really soon.
Hopefully that'll be the first school, Daniel Jenkins.
In some programs, they're using the 8th grade curriculum at some of our high schools with their 9th graders, not necessarily super appropriate, but at least a start, and Daniel Jenkins does that with social emotional learning. And there is a component for bullying in the program they have that they're using, but it is an 8th grade curriculum, so we really want to find a 9th through 12th curriculum.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions from Ms. Coker? Ms. Urieri, I think I should turn it over to you. You're the one who's
Okay,
directing
got it.
questions.
All right. Yeah, excuse me. Go ahead, Cindy.
So,
Ms.
Dr.
Cook.
Postaway, the discussions and the recommendations really said mental health counselors or other supports. So based on that, how many new mental health counselors are being placed in schools and where? How do I take this yellow or whatever and determine how many actual counselors have been placed in the schools, additional to the ones you had prior to our recommendation?
So there's a couple of reasons why schools might be yellow in that column for mental health. We still had a lot of schools that are self-paying for mental health, and our goal is to have no schools paying for their own mental health, and so.
There is no category that says mental health. There is a DMH counselor, and then there's a telemental.
So DMH are official mental health counselors from the Department of Mental Health, and telemental health are MUSC virtual counselors. So all schools have access to telemental health. It's free. As far as mental health counselors, we were in 72 schools last year. The year before, we were in, I think, 64. So every school has access, but our goal is to have at least a part-time counselor in every school, and we're still short on that for next year.
So what does the green mean in this column?
A green on that column means they have the adequate mental health services on campus and that the district is paying for those services.
And when you say mental health services, just because we need to get very clear,
Yes.
is that a professional certified mental health counselor on that site appropriate to the number of students?
It
Or
is.
is it one person regardless of the size of the school?
It is not one person regardless of the school. It's based on the needs of the school. I've met with mental health several times to determine the needs of each school. And so if it's green, it's district funded and it's appropriate for the number and volume of cases that that school is currently experiencing and our projections as we move into the new year.
And yellow?
Yellow would be schools that either are still self-paying and may still have appropriate level of service, but the district's not covering the cost yet. Or it could be that we think that school still needs additional services in our projections.
So I really think that that would be something we need to settle out. I mean, how it's being paid for isn't one of our goals that we came to you, is do we have them on that campus or not? So if at some point we could find out which ones of these yellows have appropriate staff on campus to match the green, so we can see who doesn't.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, going around, any other further questions on number 2 there? Okay. Dr. Postlewaite, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So moving on then to the third, just an update on the third action that the board took on June 24th. Arrange cultural competence training for all personnel by August 2020. So what you have in your packet is an example of the beginning of this work. There are two different efforts underway. A couple of staff members are working with the YWCA to provide the Racial Equity Institute training. And the, right now, the Racial Equity Institute proposal would allow us to get about 600 additional individuals through the two-day Racial Equity Institute training. That's the capacity that they've indicated that they have for the next year. Erica Taylor and others are communicating with them about trying to step up the amount of services we could get through YWCA's Racial Equity Institute. That obviously is not going to be enough to get to 6,000 employees. So Don Kennedy is leading the effort to draw up a project plan. This is just an example of how thorough we're trying to be as we move forward on these indicators so that we don't start a little of this and a little of that. So if you look, the first thing he has listed is the project manager, and that's where we have a lot of question marks. It's one of the things we want to talk with you about today, because as we take on this additional work, one of the things we have to be able to do is to assign people who can head up this important work and be freed from other responsibilities. Right now, we have people who are fully deployed on other items, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's no reason why we can't go ahead and outline what it is we want done. So for your information, under scope, Mr. Kennedy's outlined 5 major project activities that need to be done. Then he's talked about the deliverables at the bottom. On the next page, he identifies the critical success factors, indicates we have to determine the cost estimates, make sure that we connect with the stakeholders there. And then on the final page, he talks about the risks. So we just brought this to you today as an example of how thorough we're going to need to be on these mission critical actions, because they, if done properly, do create fundamental changes in the way we operate as a district. So this wasn't meant for anything today other than as an example of how we're trying to move forward to make sure we're on the same wavelength that the board intended before we launch.
With respect to item number 4 there, could you give just a quick update of, and again, looking at what was passed on June 24th for the develop a process for receiving proposals for effective school approaches?
Yes, sir, I can. I think you might have a couple of board members who had questions about.
Okay, excuse me. Go ahead, Ms. Green.
I don't know who came to go first. No. My question related to the cultural competency training. Do we have a, for lack of a better word, some idea of what we're asking them to be trained on? Is there like just a blanket training program that they're going through? Are we being specific about what we're asking for when we?
So on Racial Equity Institute, we accept their curriculum and their program, but the first bullet here, design the training programs, means part of that would be getting clear on what kinds of diversity we're talking about and what's the scope. We aren't just talking about racial diversity, although that's critically important in our area. There are lots of other kinds of diversity. So if you see on the scope.
What document are you looking at?
I'm looking at this one, the cultural competence training.
Where is it?
It wasn't handed to us in a hard copy.
Oh, you don't have, it's in the board docs, I'm sorry. That one was in the board docs, my bad. So on the major list of activities, that would be the first bullet there is to design the training programs, which means, among other things, to get really clear about the objectives. I mean, what outcome are we searching for?
Okay, go ahead. Mr. Frazier, go ahead.
Superintendent spoke briefly about having project management capabilities because everybody has a full-time job already. I would assume as you bring back solutions to directives, they would include that cost and would be a part of our budget
Yes, sir.
reevaluation in the fall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm going to
Yep.
speak to that in just a little bit.
Make
The
sure it's in there.
capacity.
Thank you.
All right, come around the horn, Ms. Darby, Reverend Mack. Reverend Collins. Go back, Pete. Okay, Ms. Coates.
So I think that part of what the board wanted was for everybody to be on the same page and to have the same, to be a cohesive group of people who have come together to educate children in Charleston County. So when I hear that the Racial Equity Institute, which I attended, has a capacity for 600, and then we're kind of going to look for what we want in the other one, it sounds like we are from the outset creating two parallel types of training. I don't know if that's what we were intending, to have some folks trained in one curriculum and then have the district creating the other one. So is it wise to have two parallel types of training that don't affect all of them as all of us as a cohesive group?
I see how you could have been left with that impression from my comments. I didn't mean to imply that the 600 or more individuals who go through Racial Equity Institute training have completed the district's diversity training. That's one type of diversity, and it's intensive training. It's extremely important. If we were capable of getting 6,000 people through that training, that would be what we would do. But the 600 who've gone through that training have not completed the cultural competency training per se for the district. One does not substitute for the other.
So your vision is 6,000 eventually, because I believe that, like you said, Erica was working with the Racial Equity Institute, is to have all the staff go through that training as well as another training that is yet to be created.
If that were ever possible, I think that is absolutely the right goal. But with staff turnover, you can see,
Well, I just think that at some point we either have to train the trainer and create capacity to do it, or work with the entities that we know are doing it and see if we can increase their capacity, because you're right, it has to be an ongoing thing. And the last thing is, to the part about the program director, I would ask that we tread lightly, just from the sense that every time we start something new, we need a new boss, not new workers. And I just want to make sure it's more important to have people doing that work than having the program director. We just need to get very clear on that. We have people that we have loaned out to other tasks. It's hard to say we're all so overwhelmed we can't get this done, we need to hire new people, when we are collaborating and loaning out people to other tasks.
right. We're talking about project management.
Okay.
And
Do you
then,
have
excuse me,
any further comment?
I need to see if Mr. Hollenshed has a question,
Okay,
and I
go
have
ahead,
one
Mr.
final
Hollenshed.
comment.
No, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
And then the only thing I wanted to point out, one of the other things that this particular initiative recommends is the formulation of an external diversity and inclusion advisory board. And we think that needs to be external to the district for a lot of the reasons that were shared in public comment.
Okay.
Okay. And then the fourth directive from the board was to develop a process to receive proposals for effective school approaches. And then once we get those proposals in, to involve the board, family representatives, and educators in the vetting process. So in the board documents online, there is a draft solicitation for interest. I will just highlight some of the key points in that draft. We're seeking qualified individuals or entities with a proven track record in increasing student achievement by providing comprehensive educational and administrative management to one or more low-performing elementary, middle, or high schools starting next year. Another important point just reiterates respondents must have a proven track record of implementing and managing the models, or else we will not consider them. And we're asking specifically for those who've had success in significantly increasing the success rates of children of color and poverty in urban settings. We spell out that we are not seeking to establish additional lottery-based charter, choice, or magnet schools. On this second page, if you have that in front of you, we're asking that the responses be due to us by October 4th. We will get right on the vetting process. We imagine, we hope we have some robust responses. We would imagine that parent and educator representatives from the schools that might be considered for this approach would make visits to the schools, have the opportunity to interview teachers, parents, and others who are in schools that are operated in other parts of the country. And then this is optimistic and ambitious, but we're hoping to bring recommendations to the board by December so that the planning for these schools could be taken into consideration as we get into budget and personnel decisions for second semester.
Going around the horn, Mr. Frazier?
Yeah, what would be the drop dead date for making a decision that would impact the 2020 school year?
That date would have to be the end of February.
Hope we stay mindful of that.
Ms. Green, do you have anything?
Not yet.
Ms. Darby?
No, I'm glad, I wanted to know that date, so it's good, we can get that done.
Reverend Mack?
I'm good, thank you.
Reverend Collins? Yeah, I would just, along those lines, I would say that December is still the goal, though, because I know that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Coates.
So I agree. I think that the drop dead deadline date is a date we create. So if we're going to create February 27th, I'd just as soon create December 31st because there are other dates we won't be in control of. For that reason, I would love to see this pushed up about 30 days. I feel like we need to get on it sooner than later. But something that says we're going to get this material by October, the district's going to bring us a recommendation by December, maybe we can tighten that up. My question is the same as it was in June. Is this a procurement process, or is this where we will, in a public setting, have every single application put in front of us and we as a board can discuss it?
The latter.
Excellent.
All right, Mr. Hollingshead, do you have it? Okay.
Now, just to be clear, we intend to publish this solicitation by the end of the week.
Do we have any other board members that would like to see that time frame for applications sent in pushed prior to October 4th?
Do you think, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Darby.
do you think, I know you guys have been doing some research and talking to people about this, do you think if it's published by the end of this week, we could have a deadline like by the middle of September versus it being October, the first week? I mean, could we give people 30 days or so to respond, or do they need 60 days? Or it wouldn't exactly be 60 days then?
I think we need to give them the extra time.
Okay.
I wonder, why would you speed it up?
Well, the sooner we have them, the longer we can in a public setting discuss them. The less time we have them, the more it's going to feel rushed and there's not going to be as much public discussion.
Right, but
the rush will still happen for the applicants.
Right, okay, go ahead, Mr. Frazier.
I just was going to say, if you make it too rushed, then people that are on the fence are going to say,
I'm
it
not
falls
gonna
into too hard category, I'm not going to respond. So I would rather have a robust amount of applications, and then it's on us to discuss it and make decisions faster. I'd rather put it on us.
Okay, I agree.
Thank you, thank you.
Anything else?
Just related, I'm sorry, you're asking?
No, I was just looking around. Okay.
That my question was already answered.
The charter school, the partnership school position is that the board approved in the budget is advertised, and hopefully we'll have that position filled to help lead this partnership work.
Okay.
Partnership school work.
Go ahead, Mr. Hollingshead.
And that is to keep up with the activities of the charter schools as far as fees and so forth, correct?
It's for a multitude of responsibilities. One would be to help handle the partnership schools. The other would be to make sure that we and the charters are in compliance, to respond when charters say that they expected a certain kind of support that they're not getting. In other words, create the liaison duties much more effectively, but also if there are new charters applying, to help with that vetting of the application process.
Will we ever be told if that person's hired or what their job is?
We'll make the announcement as we normally do.
But it'll just be the press release?
Right, if you'd like a copy of the job description, we could provide that for you.
Okay.
All right, next item up is board goals.
Thanks. The other thing I want to mention before I get into board goals, if you don't mind, is the mission critical directives timeframe that's in the folder. And so there were 10 board directives given to staff. We put another copy of those directives in your folder because a lot of, it's hard to keep up with everything. So the board directives are there, and this is our first attempt to say, this is what we think we can bring to you in first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. So if anything is in blue font, it is in process somehow, somewhere. If it's in black font, we haven't started it yet, and there's one in red font, and this gets to the question that arose a little bit ago. We have to create a project management framework in order to increase our district's capacity to execute these actions. So under Mr. Kennedy's leadership, we have been working on, he foresaw the need for this last year and began with the leadership team last spring, trying to help us create a formal project management structure. So we'll say a little bit more about that, but if we don't get a project management structure in place, we cannot meet your timelines.
Is a project management structure a person?
It could be that we contract with people to help us project manage. In education.
But nobody in this district can take on this work, is what you're saying. We either have to pay someone outside the district or hire someone to do it.
For project management done right, yes, ma'am. And that's one of the reasons we haven't made more progress than we should have in education in this country. Educators don't know very much about project management. And so we overstate what we can get done, and then we do not implement with fidelity.
So these were the 10 things that were brought to the board a few months ago. Todd, you brought these to the board.
Right.
It was my thinking, I thought at the time when we discussed this, that this was a way to create the questions for the mission critical team. So now that we have the recommendations from the mission critical teams, and as the lady correctly said, not only are there 5 or 6 for D20, but also lost in that conversation is a ton of items from the North Charleston community. How does this tie into the Clemson recommendations, tie into advanced ed, tie into mission critical, tie into the 1820 goals, and tie into the new 3 goals from the gentleman that Eric brought to town to do the board training? I think we need to kind of get our hands around all these different things that seem to be in silos that we're going back and forth. I thought this would go away when mission critical came. And so now we have mission critical, and instead of talking about how to accomplish these, we're going back to this. So can you help us not be so confused on where you're going with all of these different pieces of information?
It was my understanding that the board directives, the 3 board goals that are on the front of that sheet, and the board directives came from the recommendations from Advanced Ed, the Clemson study, and Advanced Ed, the Clemson study, and Shared Future, along with the goals that the board already had on the table. So this directives document brings it all together. Those are directives that we are to accomplish. In starting out to find the best ways to accomplish those directives, we started by asking 4 communities to give some suggestions. The administration gave some recommendations, but as far as I know, the directives are ways in which the board believes we will make progress toward meeting these 3 board goals, and that's how that all fits together. So one of the pieces of feedback that I think is absolutely right is that in this year's superintendent's evaluation, the board set 10 goals. One of those goals was related to the actual work of the district, the business of the district. The other 9, well, 7 of the other 9 were about processes or tactics. And then the final 2 were about character and behavior. So moving forward, I think the board is moving to these 3 goals and getting out of the business of dictating so much the everyday operations, but making clear that there are 10 things you care a heck of a lot about. and you want them done, and you want reports on them throughout the year. That's the way I see them coming together. So the community recommendations are still out there, and one of the directives is to engage the larger community in bringing back recommendations to the board. And this is the timeframe I've just outlined. This is when I think you could expect to see recommendations regarding each of these things coming back.
Any questions around the horn on that timeline? Comments, go
If
ahead.
I understood Ms. Coates' question, I think it goes to the January, March 2020 timeframe, which is informed by community meetings, what the recommendations are going to be with regard to school mergers, facility use, and all of that. That's all a part of coming to that answer.
Yeah, this was created, we got the Clemson report in August.
Understood.
This was created before the 3 goals that this is now created to get us to, and it's not been changed at all based on the mission critical. And I'm looking at the Clemson, so I think we need to do a little bit more work to see how these things tie together, because I'm looking at the concrete actions and recommendations by the Clemson study, and I'm not seeing something that correlates in these 10. And I'm certainly not seeing these 10 having changed at all for the mission critical committee meetings.
Okay, go ahead. Reverend Collins, you had
Yeah,
something?
so today, you're giving us an update of what to expect, or are we going to actually set the goals?
That's the next thing on there is board goals.
And the answer is, today, we're giving you time to start thinking about this, because you'll have a workshop only on these things. with
Only
all
on
of
which
the-
things?
Only on the 3 board goals that we're getting ready to talk about. And the workshop will show you a lot of school-level detail, so that you can see school by school where we're making progress, and you can decide whether you believe we're setting these percentages in the right place or not on these 3 goals. The board's already voted on the 3 goals.
So the performance goal, growth goal, and readiness gap goal are the 3 you're speaking about now?
Yes, sir.
That's what
So
we're
the-
speaking
so
about next.
Just a minute. So the other ones back here, the board directives, and do you support those goals?
The board directives are, the board voted second semester on these board directives. And I'm giving you an update on the progress we have made, and I'm giving you a calendar to show you when we will have the rest of the directives ready to discuss with the board. And then as soon as we finish that discussion, I'm getting ready to move to the 3 specific student achievement board goals that the board has set.
All right, so just lastly, as this says, job number 1, July to August, prepare for successful launch. So we're doing, so you're doing that now, then?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay,
These are not.
All right.
moving on to the board goals.
Thank you. This PowerPoint presentation should be in your packets. You have it? Everybody have it? Is there anyone who doesn't have a copy?
So is it this one, Rita?
It's this one.
Okay.
This one, preliminary report on board goals. Are we all good?
Yep.
The mission of this board, of course, is that all students will graduate ready to step into a highly skilled living wage job, or go on to complete more career training, or go on to college. So the work that we've done in trying to set these goals is related, these actions is related to accomplishing those 3 goals. And I think those are the right 3 goals for the board members who worked all day with the consultant a few weeks ago arrived at those 3 goals. So what are we doing? We're providing one single readiness measure to demonstrate how a school is preparing students for grade level readiness and ultimately college and career readiness. Because we have all these different measures now, and it's very confusing. So we're establishing a simple formula, algorithm for determining readiness. The board's worked to develop 3 goals, and our staff is working now to compile the data, the long-range plans with the annual targets, and to provide a more streamlined and holistic way to measure these goals. And then finally, as you know, we're working with Berkeley and both of the Dorchester districts to make sure that our whole region is using the same approach to try to determine when children are really ready, because the kinds of metrics that we're using right now have failed us. A high school diploma does not indicate readiness.
That's right.
It just doesn't. So the Education Oversight Committee in the state of South Carolina and the State Department of Education is aware of our work. And this week, Cindy Ambrose is at a U.S. congressional briefing. She was invited to come and present at that briefing about what we're trying to do to build a very different kind of accountability system. The thing we want to point out is things that teachers, is something that teachers, parents, and students emphasize all the time, that it's not fair to make a really important life-impacting judgment on one data point. So what do we,
Is this replacing, I asked this at the last meeting and no one had an answer, but is this replacing the previous data point measurements that we were doing with parents twice a year that you haven't gotten back yet?
No, it's not replacing them at all. It's just constantly trying to refine and get better and better at that.
So is this added to the dashboard, or is stuff on the dashboard going away? I mean, we need to get very specific. Is this an extra page to the dashboard, or stuff on the dashboard is not going to be there and this will?
This has been on the, I mean, having sat in my conferences, this has been on the dashboard in the past. I know it was, and what we're looking at is that, and I know that there was some pushback from teachers.
It was based on the readiness,
yes,
the growth goals.
And so the elementary will show K through 5 now. It won't show elementary to college. It'll show K through 5, the middle will show K through 8, and the high school will show for any child K through 12, the progress tracking K through 12.
Will that be based on MAP or SC Ready, or to be determined?
All the above, all the above. And that we'll talk, that's what I'm explaining today. And today is an overview so that you have time to think about it before we have the workshop, because this is important. We don't want you to feel as though you didn't have adequate time to understand this. Okay, so this is the readiness pathway. The bottom line of that band represents the lowest readiness score that one could have. And if you go clear out here to the end, you see workplace ready, 2-year college ready, and 4-year college ready. So the bottom line of this blue band represents pretty much what it takes to get into a 2-year college. Workplace ready at living wage is going to be near that blue band, because the highly skilled jobs that can be counted on for the future are going to require that students have a level of skill that is about the same as, at least the same as college entrance requires. So when we finish this work, and again, this work is building on what we've been doing, it simply refines it every single year. We're getting better and better at this. What you can expect. So this is what we shared with principals last week. The staff worked really hard to pull all of this together so that principals and the teachers, the leadership teams that were at last week's sessions, knew that they would be able to, for every single child, they'll be able to provide parents with a simple metric to show the student's current level of attainment and their spring goal in reference to where they need to be in order to be college and career ready. Teachers will also be able to discuss those lexile and quantile levels. Principals are going to be able to share information about the readiness expectation levels at their school as school starts this year, so that they can have conversations about what's the goal, what are we trying to accomplish. Goals will be measured on the spring results, so we're not going to do fall to spring anymore. It will be spring to spring. So that means we have to align SC Ready and MAP. We have to look at any assessments that students take and that we can measure spring to spring. Students will generally have more than one opportunity or measure to show that they're ready. Now, this would not be true in early childhood because it's hard for us to find multiple measures in early childhood, and it will be difficult at the high school level. The current measures are based on the tests that are already in place. Right now, our schools have preliminary performance and growth goals. with the exception of the high schools, because the measures are a whole lot more difficult at the high school. Here's why. The high school can have performance measures, but they may not have growth measures because a student might take an end-of-course English exam this year, but they won't take an end-of-course English exam next year, or they might take ACT this year, but not next year. So they're working on some equating formulas to try to show growth in high school, but right now, high school is a challenge for us. All right, so here's the good news for educators. We're not adding any additional assessments. Students will have more than one opportunity to show their readiness, so it's not single assessment bound. But we look at these together to understand what constitutes readiness. So whether you're looking at Lexile or Quantile or MAP score or SE Ready or ACT, we know how that equates inside that readiness band. So we can talk a whole lot more realistically and logically with parents about the extent to which their children are prepared. So the next slide just repeats the 3 goals that you have adopted as a board, and then the rest of this conversation is going to be about how we are going to arrive at those percentages for the next 3 years. So on the performance, you have a certain percentage of students who will achieve at or above their grade level expectations in reading and in math. In growth, you'll have a certain percentage of students who meet their 1-year growth levels. And then in readiness, and these are both about readiness. The first and second are about readiness, but what we ultimately want to do is get the workplace skills built in there.
With respect to number 2, just
Yes.
while we're discussing it, each child, when you're in your conference and you're pulled up, you've got, for your MAP, your RIT score, you've got a goal for your growth that year.
Right.
Like, would it be better to have this as percentage of children who meet their growth goal?
You can have it as percentage who meet their growth goal. You could have it as either one. A growth goal is not necessarily 1 full year, though. So
Right.
a growth goal for one child might not be 1 full year of academic growth.
Okay.
Because of where they are. So you get a better, it's easier to meet. It's easier to say that children met their growth goals, because their growth goals, if you're scoring at, as example, if you're scoring at the 35th percentile, your growth goal is compared to all the other children in the country who are scoring at the 35th percentile, which means you're going to move along and stay at the 35th percentile. Our job is to make sure that you're at the 35th percentile in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. I think maybe that's what had been used in the past. But we've got to grow more children a whole year a year. Because if you're behind, you've got to grow not only to the 35th percentile, but you've got to move up some. So the next slide helps us understand that a little bit. What is average achievement and average growth, and what is grade level average? There's no absolute North Star to say what 5th grade, what constitutes being on grade level in 5th grade. Test makers for every test that I'm aware of, and certainly the Northwest Evaluation Association that makes the math test, every few years renorms their test. And they renorm by looking at the thousands, hundreds of thousands, and sometimes millions of data points of students taking tests, and they find that ideal point where 50% of the students have scored below that midpoint and 50% have scored above, and they'll say that is grade level. For 5th graders, this is 5th grade level. Now, 5 years from now, that particular score might not be 5th grade level if they have renormed. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? It's the way tests work. And so every time our state changes the test, it throws off our discussions about how kids are doing, because we don't know what, there aren't a whole lot of kids in South Carolina taking the test, not like a national database. And we don't know for a little while where that midpoint is. This is also true for growth. So when we say the numbers, the percentage of students who made the 1 year's growth per year, this green line right there, this doesn't show up very well on that, but that green line is 1 year's growth. So the test producer says, when we look across this nation at the thousands of districts that use MAP assessments, and we average all of the scores, if you're at each of the percentile ranges, this is how much growth you made, that's average growth for you. They average them all together and look at the midpoint of growth and say this equals 1 year's growth. So that might be confusing, and perhaps I'm not articulating it very well, but there's no absolute standard of I grew from 4th grade to 5th grade. It's I kept up with all the 4th graders in the country who learned this much this year. So for a district to have 50% of its students growing a year, that is average. If you have more than 50% of your students growing a year per year, you're above average. You're doing better than most of the districts, than all of the districts in the country who participated in that particular assessment. Does that make sense?
That doesn't make it good.
It doesn't make it good.
No.
But these are the assessments we have to work with in education, and this is the total mind shift.
If everybody's doing worse, average is doing worse. That's not acceptable.
And that's how it works.
Wow.
And if everybody's doing better, average is doing better, which is what happens when a company renorms a test and it looks as though not enough of our children made the 75th percentile, for example. So this is a really important concept to keep in mind as we talk about these percentages, because we're going to want to set the percentages at 90% or more. But that makes us part of such a skewed group, it's not possible. So here's what we're thinking about. Last week, each elementary and middle school received a reading and math performance and growth goal. High schools received a college and career readiness goal and a performance but not a growth goal, because we don't know how to do growth goals at high school yet. They don't take MAP tests. Here's what we want to point out. The target goals that we are setting for those schools reflect that every single year they reduce by 10% the percentage of students who are not in the readiness pathway. So if you think back to that readiness pathway, that blue pathway, the challenge is every single year in your school you reduce by 10% the percentage of students who are below that readiness pathway.
That's what you're saying, going back to this, we have schools in which 30, 40, 50% of our kids are here.
Right.
And when you said 50% 1-year growth is average, is there any studies on districts that have so many students not hitting that 1 year? I mean, it seems like, I'm trying to figure out if that's national. You're saying this is kind of national, 50% are at the grade level or 50% are not. That creates the green line. But we have traditionally had a large portion of children that aren't even on the scale.
Right.
What does MAP say about those kinds of students?
They show that they start behind and they stay behind. That's the national trend. So what the transformative work that has to happen in education is breaking that trend. And it doesn't happen very often. It has happened school by school. I don't know of any school district in the country that's broken that relationship that's so strong between poverty and achievement. But what seems reasonable to us at the district level that has broken and held the relationship between poverty and achievement.
If there was, we'd all be doing whatever they're doing.
There are schools that have done it, individual schools.
Okay.
Individual schools can do it, but scaling it to system-wide achievement.
But every school doesn't fit a particular footprint, though. Every school is different, or every economic background of that child in that particular area may be different from what they're going through.
Right. So, Mrs. Coates, to your point, if a school has 80% of its children below the blue line, our expectation for next year would be that school moves 10% of the 80% up into the blue. And if you can't do that, then you at least need to move at least 10% of that 80% more than a year, so that we can start figuring out what it takes to move those that are below the readiness line. That's the big research question in education, and we can do it at that. It's done pretty well at the lower grades, but holding on to that as children move through the system is really hard. So this is how we're working on setting these targets. So just for your consideration, this is preliminary. Across our district, if we use that calculation that I just described, that every year, every school moves 10% of the percentage of students who are below readiness up into the readiness. Within 3 years, our whole district would move from the from and tos here that you see on the performance goals. Currently, we have 58.1% of our students scoring at or above the grade level expectations. We would move that to 62.2%. That sounds like incremental growth, but that means that every school, to reach that, we'll do these calculations if you'd like. The principals did a worksheet on this last week. If we do that, that would move our district to 62.2% by 2022. So that's the way we just lump together grades 1 through 8, and of course these are broken out for math and reading, but we just wanted to give you the highlight of how we're thinking about this today.
So I guess the question is, and we could start, because this is where I wanted to get. What percentage of students can you move? And what you're saying is we can go from 58% to 62% in 3 school years.
We think, I'm not saying we can do it, we think that's a reasonable target, but it assumes that every school moves 10% of those who are below per year.
And that's the numbers it takes to get it. Can we have some discussions on the monies and the programs that we added in the 17-18 school year, which we haven't gotten that yet, and haven't gotten the 18-19 school year, to see if our money's in the right place? How do you know, I guess you came up with this goal starting for next year, starting for August. Does that mean you believe that this year's budget has everything in the right place to make that happen?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Did you use the 17-18 to 18-19 change in budget to see what that did?
You're going to get all that together. You're going to get the investments that we think worked, and you're going to get the investments that we think didn't work.
And are we going to get data that says you asked us for $8 million to do this program, and we're going to get the educational outcomes of that program, or are you going to kind of combine that and give us your summary?
We'll give you whatever level you want, but I think that
whatever level the majority of the board wants.
Whatever level the majority wants, but I think that what you would want to see, for example, you invested in bridge mathematics program. You would want to see if the schools that implemented that program with fidelity have shown significant gains in mathematics to a greater extent than schools that did not use bridge mathematics.
Right.
I would think
and we
that's
didn't
what
see
you
that
want to
today in the materials we were looking at, so I'm wondering if that's because you don't have it, or you're summarizing it for us rather than giving it to us.
It's because the South Carolina Ready data, we want that all to be together. We could tell you on MAP, but we can't tell you publicly yet on SC Ready. So we'll bring all that together. The staff is working on the programmatic analysis that links up to what worked and what didn't work. We can tell you that there's a reading program that has made tremendous difference in Florida, and in 2 of our schools where we used it, we didn't see much of a difference, but when we go back to examine, we realize it wasn't implemented with fidelity. So that's all the explanation. It's complicated because there are so many variables. So to the extent that we think it will be meaningful, that all of this is coming to you together, and that's why you don't have a recommendation, one of the reasons you don't have a recommendation to revise your budget in August, because you need more information about where to make the investments. Does that address the question?
Okay, go ahead, Reverend Collins.
Dr. Postlewaite, looking at your goals, and then on the draft board goals and directives, you have by June 2022 for students will achieve at or above grade level readiness. Then the final one is by June 2024, the readiness gap, students will achieve will meet college and career readiness expectation levels in reading, math, workplace skills, and so forth. So that's a 5-year goal, and the others are, from what I can see, are 3-year goals. So when we first started doing the goals, I may have missed it, but I thought we were making annual goals for each year. There'd be a goal for the 19-20 school year, a goal for the 20-21 year, and for the 20-21-22. That each year we have a goal. But from what if I'm understanding right, this goal, we're aiming at a 3-year period to reach the first 2 goals, and the 5-year period to reach the third goal. So I think that's a long time to set a goal out.
Okay.
Or can we look at some annual goal and?
Okay, so I'm going to do just a quick timeout, and that's a really good question. Reverend Collins was referring to this document that had the 3 goals, and then this document. I heard 3 questions in there. Let me take the one about the annual goals. Yes, there'll be annual goals. There'll be annual goals for every school and for the district. The schools last week got their preliminary annual goal. Their annual goal is based on the precise achievement of every single child who's enrolled in that school. That goal will be adjusted after the 12-day count because students may move from school to school. And it is based on every single child who's enrolled in a school. It is that precise. So they'll have their goals for this coming year, and we think the district goal shouldn't change much because unless we have a lot of students come or go, this is probably going to be what we'll recommend as our goal. That measures growth, and it measures academic performance toward readiness. This third goal.
We'll hold that for that first one a minute, if you don't mind. Okay, so we kind of go in the same direction.
Good.
But if the school's goal is that 12-month period or 9 months we had to work, but the board goal is a 3 or 5-year goal, so then we have minister goals in between? Instead of the actual board, the full board goal in the next school year?
Right. What the consultant who worked with the board recommended was that you set 3-year goals, and then you set targets for each year in between so you can see the places where you're on target and the place where you're missing. So we can make adjustments as we go to figure out what we need to do differently.
So annually, we have to look at it annually to see if we made our goal for that year then,
Right.
by school.
By school and by district.
And really throughout the year though, right?
Right.
Yeah, he said 3 to 4 times a year that we would check the goals, make sure we're on target for that year.
Right.
So I would hate to see in 3 years that, or even 2 years that we're halfway behind, or if we're doing very great, we need to know that.
Yeah.
All right, this is an important conversation. Just timelines, I want to make sure we get everybody's input going around the horn. Ms. Green?
I guess my only question was, in terms of determining in terms of looking at where we are now and where we think we can be in 3 years, like from the 58.1% to the 62.2%, how do you come up with that?
And we'll show you that in the workshop. It is looking at the mathematics of if every school that we have reduces by 10% per year, the percentage of students below that readiness. This is where it gets us. If you aggregate that all together, district-wide, it would get us from here to here.
And then in that workshop, will we talk about that 10%? Also, we'll see how you came up with 10%.
We're going to give you a worksheet and ask you to work on it with your own calculator and see if you come up with the same thing we did.
Okay.
So you can see exactly how we did it. And if you think there's a better algorithm, we're open to that.
All right, Ms. Darby?
Good.
Reverend Mack? I'm good. All right, since y'all spoken, Mr. Hollinshed, all right.
Okay, I'm going to finish this up then. The growth goals sort of work the same way. 1 year of academic growth is what is expected. We know that we have to grow some students more than a year per year. The next slide shows you what measures we'll use, and again, it just spells out the measures that you have seen before. No new measures, which is good news for parents, students, and teachers. This gives you an example of the performance goals where the cut scores are set. This is what the state set. If you look down the readiness level in English language arts, the state tested all the students and then decided where to set the cut scores. So they set 1st to 25th, 26th to 50th, 51st to 76th, and 77th to 90th. Here's the thing I want to point out, just so you know. In this state, with their new accountability system, in order for a student to exceed readiness, for every student you have who exceeds readiness, your school gets 4 points, I believe. They have to have a Lexile level at 970. 970 is a 7th grade Lexile level. In South Carolina, in order for a school to get the points for a student to have exceeded readiness, they must hit that 7th grade Lexile level.
So you're saying that the 970 is a 7th grade Lexile level. Is South Carolina saying that, or do they disagree with you? Because are they saying, yes, we believe that's a fact, but we're going to say our 3rd graders should be achieving that high, or do they disagree with what you said and they're saying that's not a 7th grade level?
Now, I don't think that was intentional on their part. It's the first year they gave the test, and they just had to find cut points that seemed to work with the majority of scores. I think that was inadvertent on their part.
This was generated out of the 18-19 school year?
18, 19, 19, 20, probably 17, 18 school year with the first year the assessments were given. So this is what happens when a state makes their own tests. I'm just telling you, I think it was an unintended consequence, but they'll likely be making some adjustments, and that's why we emphasize using MAP, because it's a nationally normed test that gives us a little bit better confidence level. The next slide simply shows you some of the indicators that the state will consider using to determine readiness in grades K through 12, the end of course outcomes, AP exams, IB exams, ACT composite, SAT composite, the National Career Readiness Certificate, which is tough. The national certificates are hard. That next one is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. We'll use a cut score of 31, which is the lowest that any military branch will accept. The dual credit work-based learning are those apprenticeships that have some pretty stiff requirements with them. The career technical education leaders and so forth. That's what we'll be looking for internally when we look at readiness indicators. But for grades 9 and 10, if a student hadn't done any of these, because we have 9th and 10th graders who haven't taken an end-of-course exam, we'll fall back to the MAP. So final couple slides here. I just want to show you the communication planning that principals were doing last week, because one of the things you asked us to do is to make sure that every teacher is aware as school starts of what we're doing, what this means. Teachers will have their classroom targets, but again, those may shift after 12 days. They'll get the preliminary targets, but after 12 days, those will be adjusted for the specific students they have. And then finally, I just wanted to show you these summaries from the Northwest Evaluation Association. Overall, on the MAP tests, our reading we're high achievement and high growth. Our median status percentile in reading is 63rd. Remember, nationally it's 50. Our median growth percentile is 53rd, so that's slightly above the national average. We're not so high in math. Our math achievement needs some work. We're at the 55th percentile. The median growth is a little above the national average. But here's what's unique about Charleston County. So the good thing is, if you look at the left-hand axis, that's achievement from low to high. Across the bottom is growth from low to high. As a district, we fall barely, but we fall where we want to be in that quadrant that is high achievement and high growth. That's where we fall as a district. What happens when we look at that a little more closely is that we have 29 schools in high achievement, high growth. we have 11 schools that had high growth but low achievement. So that is 40 of our K-8 schools. These are only K-8 schools. These are 40 K-8 schools who are on the right-hand side of this graph, which is where we want them to be. It's a school that's made high growth, low achievement may be one of the fastest improving schools in the district, but it's just not going to show in that upper right-hand quadrant yet. The schools we have to worry about are those on the left-hand side of that quadrant. Those who had high achievement but made very little growth are worrisome, and those that are in that bottom quadrant are the schools that we'll be talking with you about. Some of that discussion will be in executive session. But those are the schools that are very worrisome. They have low achievement and they did not make growth. So we will give you the detail on this at that workshop. And then I just want to sort of show you, this is from Northwest Evaluation Association. These are national data. What they originally were looking for was the summer slide, the extent to which impoverished children lose ground over the summer, but they found something really interesting. Between 2008 and 2016, this is the gap that existed between high poverty students and non-high poverty students. The job of public schools these days is not only to keep that blue line high, but to find ways of operating and behaving differently to move the red line up. So this is a national trend, and what we're trying to do as a district is to figure out how to break this trend, not just school by school, but as a district. That's the challenge that we've begun to confront, but there's a whole lot more work that we have to do. I think when we think about having every school move 10% of the students who are below the readiness pathway every year, that gives us the rationale we have for why those schools need more resources, right? Because they have more children that they've got to move. If 80% of your children are below that blue line, you have more work to do than someone who has 20% of their children below the blue line. So what are the next steps? Very quickly, we think probably before you set these percentile levels, you're going to want to enlist somebody from a national organization to just say, yes, this is robust enough, it's challenging enough, or no, it's not. I don't think you should take our word for it because we're being evaluated on it. So I think we need to get a national expert in here to make sure we're thinking about these numbers right. We will include additional pertinent information. We'll give you the measures to you as they become available, but we will absolutely share everything with you in an upcoming work session. We'll look at school levels, and we'll look at disaggregated data. That is to say how students in different, what the federal government calls subgroups are doing. So I know that was a while on the board goals, but you asked us to make sure that the majority of your board meetings are focused on this work. So I talked a lot today. This work is done by the staff members who are sitting there. They are the ones who carry this work and who did a phenomenal job in a 2-day workshop with principals last week, getting us all prepared to start the school year with a very clear mindset about what we're trying to do and how we'll measure. So, thank you.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if we had any dates that we were looking at for the workshop. We haven't talked about that yet.
We can either use the September committee of the whole meeting, but if we get those data sooner and the board would like to meet sooner to look at them, we'll offer a date that will work. We'll poll the board first.
All right, Mr. Holland.
Just help me out for a second. The map scores that they just took for the district, are they back?
We have map scores, we do.
Yeah.
They're the ones
Yeah. Can we get a copy of that?
We would like to share we can give you a copy of the map scores. We'd like to share with you in context the map and the SC Ready, because SC Ready is what counts for accountability purposes, and our map data we've made some significant gains, but what if that doesn't translate to SC Ready? We're happy to give it to you. We just don't want to draw any
No, I understand, I'm just curious. I just like to see them.
I tell you what, we have what's called the Insights Report that NWEA prepares and shows you which schools are where in those quadrants. That might be very helpful
Yeah,
to you.
okay, that'll be good.
Okay, all right.
All right, the next item up is the operations capital projects report from Ms. Costello. Did anybody have any questions on that? That was presented in your packet. No. All right, hearing none. Thank you very much.
Good job, Joyce.
All right. The next item up is Audit and Finance Committee review. Things coming forward for our next board meeting for you to vote on are committee membership extension that Brett Johnson's the CFO for Roper St. Francis agreed to serve for an additional 2 years on, and then, so that'll be coming for you for a vote. And then 2 is a tax anticipation note that we do it every year to manage cash flow. Historically, we have done it for as high as 80 million. You pay interest on that, which comes out to real dollars in the hundreds of thousands, and eats up dollars that can go to teacher salaries. This year, because of the way y'all have budgeted, we're going to have roughly, I want to say 88 million in our reserve at this point, and because there'll be an additional 8 million coming from last year, that extra allows you to gives you the freedom not to need so much cash to finance a cash flow, so it saves you money in interest.
So what's the 10?
The 10 is going to be roughly 35 or 36 million.
And that's going to be paid off with the spring bond, right? That'll get paid off with the spring bond?
It does.
And
no,
it'll be paid off.
No, it gets paid off.
With the taxes revenue that comes in January, okay.
And they may not end up needing that much, but they felt like that was conservatively enough to allow us to have enough cash to get us through till the receipts start coming in.
That's good.
The next item up is public comments for non-agenda items.
Do we have any of those there? No?
The public comments.
Next
People came in.
We don't have any?
We don't
Okay,
have any.
going on to the, okay, Jeff Montgomery, please come forward. Yep.
Have a timer or anything?
Yes, got 2 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Jeff Montgomery. My wife says I'm terrible about planning, and as a matter of fact, I'm not allowed to do it for the family anymore because about 4:30 at night I'll say, you know what, I think I'll smoke a chicken tonight for dinner. And she'd say, well, it takes 4 hours to smoke the chicken. You haven't brined it yet, and you haven't been to the store. You don't, in fact, have a chicken. And so I've had my rights revoked as far as planning for the family. Similarly, I have concerns about the concept of doubling the enrollment at Buist over the next 8 years. I looked online. I was very surprised to hear this issue come up. I hadn't heard anything about it before, and then all of a sudden, boom, there it was. I sent a letter to the superintendent asking for more details and never heard anything back. And so I'm a little concerned about the planning here. When I go to visit my son at Buist, the cafeteria is packed. The gymnasium is packed. The playground is packed. I don't know where double the amount of students go in the school. And so this is something that obviously, if it's obvious to me that there may not be a good plan in place, then I'm really worried that there is in fact. So let's see. I got off track. This is going much worse than I thought it would. I'm sorry. So now knowing my wife will veto the chicken idea. If I were to come up with that plan just to, knowing she would veto it, that's not having a plan. That's acting in bad faith. Because I can go, oh, I'll smoke a chicken, and I know she'll veto it, and she'll make dinner, and then I'm off the hook. So that's a different thing than not having a plan. That's sort of pernicious. That's in bad faith. And I hope that's not what's going on, but it is another possibility. Maybe there is a plan, and we haven't seen it, and we haven't heard of it. And here's the thing. I'm a likely ally. I've never been the sort of person to come talk at school board meetings. I always wonder what those people are so mad about. I want to see more diversity and better education options in D20. Work with us. Don't rush this thing through. Don't push it through. There are lots of allies that will work with you and make it happen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. The next item up is a new business establishing an advisory group. This is Reverend Mack.
Yes, so here's an opportunity, I'd like the board to explore the possibility, and I'll answer any questions you may have about an advisory group, which will take a look into the Chief Diversity Officer's duties and responsibilities. At one point, you may recall, we had created a position for a Chief Diversity Officer, where we began to explore the possibility of such. We did not fill that position, but we did have an opportunity to create and draft a position and began the process, but it got stalled at some point. So at this point, we're now entering into this mission critical action piece to where the work that's ahead of us as we begin to look at the district holistically on areas that needs improvement as we look at the vast majority of all of our schools. This work is massive. It requires a lot of attention, detail. In actuality, we need someone that's going to go to sleep with this on their mind and wake up with it on their mind in order for us to be able to accomplish the mission that the directives that this board is giving. What I'm asking for this advisory group, or we're asking for this advisory group to do, is to take a look at the duties and responsibility of what this position would look like. In essence, this advisory group will be made up of people that are serving in that capacity as a Chief Diversity Officer of some sort on some level. We have a number of these individuals that's out there that's working in this capacity daily and every day. And this group will serve as such and give recommendation and feedback to us, the board, as to how this position will be crafted and the duties and the responsibility. Not only that, I think this advisory group will also continue to be a great response back to us as a district as we continue to carry out this mission critical action work. It's a 3-year development plan that we're moving forward with, and as this work continues, we need a set of eyes that's out there as well to help keep us focused on the work that's at hand. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Ms. Green?
Dr. Postlewaite, you indicated when you were talking that there was some outside group, advisory group, that we needed to look at establishing. You remember saying that during your...
Yes, ma'am. It was, Mr. Kennedy had included that in his outline for the cultural competency work plan.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking, could we, if we did establish this group, could it be the one and the same? Okay.
Well, it will be in line with the same work,
Yeah.
actually. Good point.
Okay.
I didn't
I'd
catch
like-
that earlier.
Go ahead.
I just want to make a motion that we establish an advisory group to look at Chief Diversity Office duties and responsibilities to align with mission critical actions, which I think if we take action on this today, it would then go on the August 26th board agenda.
Okay.
It's not listed as
So
action,
we got
is it?
is that a motion?
Yeah, that's a motion,
Is there a
sorry.
second on that?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second discussion, and we got some more questions. Reverend Collins, then Mr. Hollenshed.
Let Mr.
Me.
Hollenshed go
Hollenshed,
first.
go ahead.
And me.
I'm not so haphazardly in agreement with that. Let me explain why. When I got on this board and we talked about hiring a diversity officer, when Mr. Miller was here, we were gun-ho for it, we did interviews, and all of a sudden it got stymied and stalled. Now you're telling me you want to reinvent this again, but include other people who are in that field. Well, in that particular field, I'm just saying within the Charleston area, there's not too many people I would think that's credible to serve on an advisory committee for that. And then therefore, we have more bureaucracy tied up into a position that could be critical and could be beneficial, but then we're glamorizing it. I think if we're going to go advertise for that position, let's just advertise for the position and let's fill it. Diversity is an issue that is often played with but never perfected. And I don't have much time for fanfare. I just don't, I'm sorry.
Well,
Well-
I think, can I say something, and then Eric, sorry, I have my, so I don't think this is,
To speak as well.
I don't think it's fanfare. I think it's getting the people who are out there doing this work right now. I mean, I know of a couple people.
I'm not cutting you off, Kate, but if what I think is going to happen, I think the people that's going to be brought into the circle of this, I question, because I don't see any fruits of their labor in that fear within the Charleston area. I just don't.
Okay.
I'm subject for a change, Kate. I mean, unless you can prove me different.
Okay,
All right,
I can do
Going
that.
around the horn, Reverend Collins?
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Mack and Ms. Darby, for the idea. My thoughts is that we've had lots of studies on diversity, and racial equality. We had the Clemson study, Rios. I mean, then we have employees that give us firsthand experience, parents, teachers. And if we're going to form a group, sure, you include some of those people that work in that position, but not only them. You think you need to have the public, parents, board members, staff, a diverse group of people. So you won't like you won't find very many people in Charleston that position. You find some, but none that's really have made some significant impact for as outcomes concerns. You find the same thing in employment. I don't want to be something we have to spend money on to meet and to choose somebody when we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars already, or a long 6-month process that looks like we're doing something promoting diversity, but then at the end it be another show that we didn't do anything. So I'm hoping that we can get a job description, which to me, which I think we had one before. We had a job description before, so I don't know why we need to get a new group now for that. But get a job description, advertise for the position, hire the person, set our goals. What do we want to accomplish? And I don't see the reason making that hard. We got to do that within 30 to 90 days.
So just to be clear, this is not a hired or a consultant request for payment. This will be a volunteered board or advisory board that will look at, as I stated in my opening remarks, the duties and responsibilities that was already created for the Chief Diversity Officer, to take a look at those responsibilities again and make sure that they're in line with what this board have given directives as far as the mission critical action is moving forward, to make sure that those duties are aligned, because before the Chief Diversity Officer's responsibilities and duties was crafted differently. So things have changed and we have shifted to some degree. And we have established board goals and board directives. So those individuals who work in that capacity understands what type of individual is pretty much needed. Now, they're not hiring the individual, okay? They're just crafting and looking at the duties and responsibilities and making those recommendations back to us.
But what is your time frame, and what is your exact goal of the committee? Like I said, we got the responsibilities already listed. So then what is our time frame, and then what's the goal? We have Clemson already told us our weaknesses and our areas, what we need to do.
Right.
We've heard it for year after year, we know. So what really is the goal then?
So the goal is to get someone in ASAP. ASAP could mean once the committee has been established within a 60 to 90-day time frame, to be able to report back to this board or recommend back to this board duties and responsibility changes so that we can begin to look at getting someone in that role.
Okay, Ms. Coates, and then Mr. Hollenshed.
So, today, we have talked about a program to do the Racial Equity Institute training. Parallel to that, a program to create a as yet to be determined diversity training. with the statement that we need a project manager to manage that project. We have said that we're still crafting the exact job description for the person we put into the budget for the charter schools, partner schools, and now their job, in the superintendent's words, is to be more robust. And as Joyce pointed out, we're talking about an advisory group as part of the mission critical, and I really hate that we've just become where we use mission critical. We've literally not discussed any mission critical items today. We've discussed goals and stuff, which is what we should have done. But I fear this is two things. Number one, I can't think of another position that this board has ever said we want an outside entity of non-described public members to create the job description. In fact, most of what this board says is we need to let the district do the work that they do. And I don't want to go down a road that says we pick and choose what jobs the public crafts and what job descriptions the professionals craft. So I would ask that we get a little bit more tight on that and that we blend it into what we're currently doing. Is this the project manager? Or is this the project manager who's going to work for the chief diversity officer that you envision? Or is the chief diversity officer going to work for the project manager? Or how is that crafted? One of the things we have is so many different things we're doing that are almost the same, but not. And I would just say that while I appreciate the motion coming forward, we probably need to be more specific. A motion that says we're going to go find people to create a job description for something that almost got written outside of all the other things we just talked about that we're going to hire and add into the budget in September. I would like to see it coordinated better.
So just to be clear, I mean, I clearly indicated that we're not going to just find people or put people on a committee to do this type of work.
You're not giving, in the motion, it just simply says undefined, undetermined. I mean, I understand the intent, put it in the motion then.
I mean, well, that's fine, we can add that to the motion.
Mr. Collins,
Just reiterating that, you know, when we look at this, we start up with mission critical, with a community group of people that's supposed to come back and give us an opinion of what was going on in the community as far as schools go. And all of a sudden it became a mandate without vetting it real properly that the board wanted to implement. Now we're going to do a committee of diversity people. It's supposed to be a volunteer committee, but then it's going to come back with a mandate. And the issue is critical and it's pertinent as a diversity officer. Should be something crafted by the board. The board needs to have input into it. It needs to be something that if the board is going to fund again or work with the superintendent on, then the board has to be comfortable in it. I can remember a few months back, gosh, almost a year ago, you know, we hired Craig Askews, and he came in to do some community work for us, and then he took on some diversity issues, and when he did, he got chased off. Defining what you're going to do in the diversity position. Let me finish my point. Define what you're going to do with the diversity position, because that person may serve in an area in construction needs, or may be on staffing of the district, may be in student relations, may be in parent relations. That's just a broad paintbrush that we're talking about dealing with a diversity issue. So I'm not warm to that. I mean, if you're going to hire someone and Dr. Posick wants to go out there and interview and hire someone, then that's fine. You know, I'm not warm to that.
Okay, going around, Mr. Frazier, and then.
I think we are getting ahead of ourselves. We don't have a job description to debate.
We did.
We're being asked to create a different one with a group of experts. Our Audit and Finance Committee is a perfect example where we have board members and community members working together on stuff for which they have a specific skill set. So I think this is another example of bringing in people that have that skill set. They can bring back a recommendation, and we can choose to turn it up or turn it down. We're not spending any money today.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Harvey.
So I'd like to amend my motion so that would now say discuss the or to establish an advisory group of diversity professionals in the Charleston area to look at chief diversity officer duties and responsibilities to assign with the mission-critical actions and return with recommendations to the board within, and somebody can make this sound better if they want, within 90 days of beginning their work. So it'd be a 90-day
Ad hoc committee
I
made
could
up
think-
of professionals in the industry. I would accept that
diversity
amendment.
professionals in the industry in the Charleston area.
Well, not an ad hoc committee,
Not
because
an
that
ad
would
hoc.
require board policies. We said ad hoc committee, so.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
But short.
An ad hoc
and-
committee that's not called an ad hoc committee because it's put
That
together for a
ends, it
temporary
ends,
purpose.
right.
Offer a friendly amendment
Yes, ma'am.
to you. I would probably suggest that we not make it just diversity specific. I think we want some other expertise on that committee. So I don't think we want a committee consisting only of.
Including.
But includes
Including.
diversity, but you could have some other people.
Includes, yeah, that's better,
Right,
includes.
Right, you could have some
Who picks-
HR, some.
Who selects the committee? Just out of curiosity, I mean, I'm hearing the motion. Who's going to pick the committee?
It's the board, I guess.
Well, can we address Joyce's
Can the
point
board
first?
put-
can the
So
board
could
do the
we-
committee?
Can we say, so I like that idea, we could just say an advisory group including diversity professionals, so it doesn't have to be only diversity professionals.
So
Okay.
who advertises, who sets the standards for the people applying, and who selects the committee?
So, good question, and so Mr. Kennedy has been heading up this Future Share Project piece. He's been heading up the Mission Critical Action piece. So I would very much align to believe that Mr. Kennedy will be the one that would craft this invitation that will go out, or not solicitation, but the information that will go out asking those interesting parties that may be interested in serving on this advisory group, that they, and Mr. Kennedy, I'm not putting you on Flatstone, but you've been leading this work and you've been engaging with all of the efforts. So I would imagine that Mr. Kennedy will be the one that they'll be replying to of interest to serve on this advisory group.
So who selects the committee?
That will be Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Hollingshead.
Do you have some input into this, Mr. Kennedy?
You just got it.
I mean,
Well, I mean, it's.
you just
He's
got
tasked
thrown
with
under
the
the
project
bus in
manager
this.
job
You got some
description, now you're
input
gonna
into
go
this?
to?
Call the question.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, all right, the question's been called, vote will go forward.
I would make it very clear that I feel very strongly, I'm going to vote for this, but and Reverend Mack and I had some conversations about this before the meeting. There's some work that needs to be cleared up. It's these types of conversations in which everything gets said, and then we vote, and then all of a sudden it ends up on a potential consent, and the next thing we do is we end up telling the public, you should have known. I would strongly request that even if this is a unanimous vote, that we do not put it on potential consent.
Well, as important.
That we have it crafted better for the next
Yeah,
board meeting.
As important as this is, I mean, I would like for us to really take the time. I mean, if there's some unclear questions, because this work is very important, it's critical.
So you agree that it will not be on the potential consent for the August board meeting if it passes today?
So we talk about it at the
So we'll-
August board
Right,
meeting.
it gives us 2 weeks to think about
Yes.
it, and it gives us time
Yes.
to talk about it and thoroughly understand what we're doing.
That's fine.
One last thing.
Yes.
If we hire the person to fill the role of diversity, or to improve diversity in the district, if they don't have any authority to do anything, it won't amount to hill of beans. They just have the position only.
And along those lines, I've got a lot of questions about this between voting on it now and 2 weeks from now.
Right, that's why we're going to have it in
I don't
the,
want to have a big show that we deal taking on race issues and we're really not doing that.
So if you have specific questions, just shoot an email so we can,
Yes.
Reverend Mack can be
But
prepared for those.
this will be
on the
voted
consent
on,
today, and then it'll be on the August 26th
26th, got
board
it.
meeting, not on potential consent.
Yeah.
Got it. So, I mean, I've made some of the notes, but I might not have gotten them all.
I would ask the district to do some preparation to see how this goes into the $5 million, the mission critical, the project manager, the charter school, and the partner
currently it
schools.
falls under
Just,
Mr.
we need
Kennedy.
to see that it's coordinated, that we don't have a lot of different fingers going out and doing stuff. So I would like the district to do some work to see how it coordinates into the other recommendations for new executive level people we've suggested today.
Okay, all right, we've got a vote, we're waiting on,
Collins,
nope, he's voted.
he's voted.
Yep.
Everybody
All
vote?
right, with respect to the upcoming meetings, those are published. August 26th is our next regular board meeting. September 9th is the next committee of the whole, and September 23rd is the following board meeting.
Move to adjourn.
We've got a motion to adjourn. All in favor, aye?
Aye. So can we?
Okay,
can
we
take a little
will
break?
begin our special call meeting at 5:15.
5:15.